Tonight, Maine's Republican Party announced Mitt Romney as the winner of their caucuses.
That winner is Mitt Romney.
What the headlines haven't told you is that what happened in Maine is the messiest caucus Republicans have had so far.
Certain residents in 3 of Maine's counties are being treated right now as if they do not exist.
The numbers that the state GOP in Maine are reporting are, according to caucus chairman, incorrect.
Kennebec County did vote as they were supposed to last week, but their vote total, as you see here, shows up as a 0 in the Republican Party's official results. Washington County postponed their caucuses on Saturday because of a snowstorm they expected to hit the area.
There's a lot more than what you said. The man who canceled it was a Mitt Romney supporter, and the snowstorm he predicted didn't happen.
Then there's Waldo County. Even though nearly all Waldo County towns held caucuses on February 4th, here's how most of Waldo County's votes look. Look in the official Republican Party's results list. 0 votes.
Waldo County, where voters from 18 towns gathered for municipal caucuses. I talked with Matt McDonald, a pastor of a small community church in Belfast. He was nominated as the chairman of the Belfast caucus. The state instructed the chairman to not read any of the votes aloud, and instead to send them directly to Augusta. McDonald made a motion to have the votes read aloud at the caucus, and it passed unanimously.
The vote was 8 for Ron Paul, 7 for Rick Santorum, 5 for Mitt Romney, and there were 2 undecideds.
No results have been posted from the Belfast caucus.
The lady on the line said that she had received our tallies, our votes, but hadn't recorded them online yet, and she said Romney with 9, Rick Santorum with 5, Ron Paul with 2. Well, of course, those are not the right numbers, and I told her. And she said, well, those are the numbers we have.
You see, dozens of towns on the GOP site are listed as if no one voted, including in Waterville, Maine, home to 15,000 people.
We contacted the Maine Republican Party today to find out what the heck happened to all of Waldo County's votes. So far, we have not heard back. The margin of victory for Mitt Romney in Maine was 194 votes. That's called a hair.
On every occasion, the votes that were lost were Ron Paul votes. In one case, the votes were actually transferred from paper to electronics, and the lady doing the transfer was a Mitt Romney person.
Remember what the establishment said about Reagan? He's radical and out of touch and dangerous. It's the same thing the establishment now says about Ron Paul. What's so dangerous about him? He wants a return to the Constitution. And though the Constitution is our founding document and embodies our first principles of limited government, sound money, and personal freedom, we've drifted so far from it that a return to those principles would indeed mean substantive change to the government. The only danger Ron Paul represents is to the establishment that fears its own loss of power. We've drifted so far, drowned so deep in debt, lost so many of our rights, fought so many fruitless wars, that if we don't rock the boat now, we may end up sinking.
What's your plan for tonight?
Tell the truth. I've been in politics for 35 years. My cause has been the cause of liberty.
I didn't want any media there because it's a closed meeting, and the caucus has a history of being the sausage grinder of the politics, and we don't want people to see what actually goes into the sausage.
Rick doesn't have a chance. And the powers that be want it to be Romney, and it looks like that's what's going to happen. And well, you know how that goes. And look what they did up in Maine. They want to pull out of the picture quickly, and we all know what happened. I can't say I blame them. Well, it's a moot point now, anyhow.
Supporters of Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul feel like they're being ignored, and they're getting angry about it. Take a look at the chaos that broke out at the Missouri caucuses yesterday. Well, here you see Paul supporters clashing with GOP officials. The organizers say Paul backers were being loud and obstructive, but Paul's crowds say they just want to be heard. And police there ended up arresting two of the Paul supporters. So are they in fact being disruptive, or is this what they need to do in order to get their voices heard? Well, to try to find out what's really going on, investigative journalist and publisher of the Brad blog, Brad Friedman, joins me now from our New York studio. He has been following these events very closely. Nice to see you, Brad. So things got
good to see you.
Things got pretty heated there in Missouri. Paul supporters, they feel like they're not getting a fair shot. Do you think that there's an effort to silence him, or silence them, rather?
Well, the fact is they weren't getting a fair shot. This was not a matter of Ron Paul supporters making trouble. This was a matter of the party establishment there in St. Charles County, Missouri, actually trying to hijack this caucus, putting in place some rules that they're really not allowed to do according to the Republican Party rules. They started off this thing saying, well, we have to turn off all videos, all recording devices. Now, there was nothing in the rules about that whatsoever. And the Ron Paul folks know that as soon as you shut down transparency, democracy goes away. And they were not happy about it. They spoke up, as is their right in a caucus like this. They tried to follow the rules. In fact, from my reporting and from the folks that I've talked to, and certainly from the videos that you can see at bradblog.com, it wasn't the Ron Paul folks who were breaking the rules here. It was the GOP party establishment. And happily, the Ron Paul folks stood up for themselves. It was good to see.
But then they get angry, and then it turns out that they get demonized for causing trouble.
Well, they get demonized, yes, but again, that's not their fault. That might be the media's fault, the corporate media's fault for reporting it that way. But the nice thing is, we have the video. We can see exactly what happened. We can see the leader of the Ron Paul folks, Brent Stafford, being arrested by state police out in the parking lot after they had shut down this caucus without holding their votes, without doing anything. You can see when he was arrested. You can see that he was doing absolutely nothing when he was handcuffed and hauled away. And if Ron Paul folks are furious about this, frankly, they have every right to be. And I should also add, by the way, this is not an isolated incident, what happened out there in St. Charles County, Missouri. We also saw it in Clay County, Missouri. We also saw it in Athens, Clark County, Georgia, just 1 week earlier. I've got the video of that up at bradblog.com as well. And again, it was not a matter of Ron Paul folks causing trouble. It was a matter of the party establishment who was running the delegate convention. In that case, it was a county delegate convention. Basically shutting out what appeared to be the majority of people at that convention, completely ignoring Robert's Rules of Orders, the parliamentary procedures they're supposed to use at these events, and basically railroading the entire process, shutting it down, and doing whatever they want to do, no matter what the people there, the democracy that has gathered, what they wanted to express. I think the Paul folks have every right to be outraged about this, and I'm glad they're speaking up, to be frank.
Now, earlier we reported Ron Paul came out and he raised suspicion that there is fraud going on, because he pointed to the fact that wherever he goes, he has this loud following. So he obviously has a very big network of supporters, yet he hasn't won a single caucus yet, and he is raising suspicion that perhaps there is fraud going on. Didn't really give specifics, but when you have things like this that are caught on camera, to what extent do you think fraud is possible so far in this
well,
election primary process?
Here's where I'll be a little bit critical of the Ron Paul folks. They do have a tendency to yell fraud simply because they lose elections. Now, I give them credit because they do try to oversee their electoral system, which is really important. That's next to impossible when you're using touchscreen voting machines. It's damn near impossible when you're using paper ballots that are counted by computers. And in fact, there has been fraud where you saw, for example, in Maine, in the Maine caucus, where the state GOP party chair there, Charlie Webster, comes out and announces Mitt Romney as the winner of the Maine caucus by 194 votes before two entire counties have even held their caucuses yet. So, I mean, this was, they were blatantly robbed in that case, and we've seen other cases that are similar to it. But I would caution the Ron Paul folks, while it's important to do everything you can to oversee your election, to be as transparent as possible, to not yell fraud every time you lose an election unless you have the evidence to prove it. And now we're seeing more and more there is evidence to prove where these people have simply been robbed, as they were in St. Charles, Missouri, as they were in Clark County, Georgia, in Athens, Georgia. So, rather than turn the other way and say, oh, it's those crazy Ron Paul people, I think the media would do well to pay attention to what it is they're complaining about and what it is that they are trying to oversee with our own democracy here.
So fraud, hard to prove, but it is obvious that there is some kind of an effort to alienate or to at least silence Paul supporters.
Well, there's an effort to steal caucuses, out and out steal caucuses, steal delegates. It's on video. In this case, this isn't something we have to speculate about. Caucuses are a lot more transparent than primary elections, where they're counted by computers and the citizenry can't see if ballots are counted correctly at all. But here in caucuses, they're very transparent, and we can see what has happened. And, you can look. Again, I'll point you to bradblog.com. We've got a lot of video there, showing the Republican Party establishment blatantly stealing these caucuses, stealing these delegate conventions from Ron Paul supporters. I get the feeling between these polling place photo ID laws, these restrictions that Republicans are putting in place, I get the sense that the Republican Party establishment hates democracy, really. And now you can see it on videotape at bradblog.com and YouTube and everywhere else where transparency reigns.
And Brad, you're saying stealing the caucuses, and you're saying that the establishment doesn't like democracy. I'm not sure about that, but this whole notion of stealing caucuses, doesn't this kind of contradict the whole point of a democratic election process where everyone's voice is supposed to be heard? That's the whole point of voting.
Of course, it completely undermines democracy. And look, when it comes to elections, I'm nonpartisan on this stuff. I will support a Republican or a Democrat or an independent who has been screwed by the electoral system, a candidate. I'll support a Republican, a Democrat, an independent voter, a legal voter who has been disallowed from casting their legal vote. But that is what we are seeing. We are seeing a concerted effort by the Republican Party to keep people from voting, generally to keep Democrats from voting this year. And we're seeing it within the party themselves, trying to keep Ron Paul's voice out of these caucuses.
All right, Brad. Sorry to interrupt you. We're just out of time, but pleasure to have you on the show. That was Brad Friedman, investigative journalist and publisher of the Brad blog.